We have a fascinating topic today. It's something that I have been noticing lately more and more, and something that is very dear to my heart because ultimately I was going through the usual patterns of life that we're all kind of conditioned to follow, and living for outcomes and having goals and trying to climb the ladder and better ourselves. And really, the big shift for me happened when what pop culture might call midlife crisis, when all of that living for the external, nurturing the life outside of me, started to, a voice started to arise in me that there is an inner world that was being neglected in all of that. And so, as we grow up in our institutions of modern society, there really isn't any opportunity that's built in that gives us a chance to nurture our inner world equally. It's all about the outside world, it's all about doing things and accomplishing things and success and, the stuff. And that's in partly due to having been born into this 3D dimension. I mean, you can't blame us for being infatuated with this incredible world that we suddenly find ourselves in. It is really to be in spirit form one moment and then to find ourselves in these bodies with senses, and we can see and hear and taste and smell and touch things, and all the different activities and the things around us, the diversity. It's pretty remarkable. And one can forgive us to get sucked into that and become, obsessed with it in a way that becomes the central focal point of our existence, that world around us. And so our journey, all of us, begins with looking up for ourselves in that external world. We seek to find our joy, our happiness, our meaning, our purpose, all of these things in the world around us. And it takes a little time, but eventually, as we're seeking ourselves in the outside, we start to notice that no matter how many things we achieve, no matter what we own or all the quote unquote successes that we have under our belt, this permanent joy and happiness and peace that we seek, this permanent knowing of what is life all about, it keeps eluding us. And over time, the sense starts to grow in us that there must be a better way to live life. That was certainly the case with me as well. And I think maybe the big difference was that I didn't numb out and go back to work the next day. I took the time to regroup, reflect, look at my values, look at what I'd been doing. On paper, I had checked off all the boxes of what we're supposed to do to find our happiness, and still something was missing. So it's important to set aside some time when that time comes, and ideally even before that time comes, to really look within and start to recognize that the world is always changing. The nature of life is ever changing. And when we hang on to things, we achieve something and we can experience joy and fulfillment for sure, but it's only momentary. Before we know it, that joy and fulfillment and happiness that we get from achieving external objectives starts to fade again. And then if we try to cling to that, then that joy very quickly turns to misery and to clinging and to suffering. And why is it not here? And then We become obsessed with steering and controlling our environment, looking to relive that moment, even though that moment is long gone. So then we become ultimately beholden to our experiences from the past, and our happiness depends on our environment, on creating the circumstances that make us happy. And that is a never ending goose chase. And I realized that as well for myself, that no matter how perfect we create a situation, the elements of that situations are bound to change. And so if we're dependent on the situation for our joy, our happiness, our peace, then we're in trouble, because now we're chasing after this moment of permanence that never arrives. Life is not permanent. It's always moving and evolving. And so over time, this sense that life is ultimately a reflection of who we are starts to arise. The person standing right next to us, witnessing the same situation, has a completely different take on what's just happened. And if we keep arguing and fighting and validating our beliefs against the other person's beliefs, or what we saw and what they saw and what it all means and what they think it means, then we find ourselves on this roller coaster experience of life, where we can never create the circumstances long enough to experience joy long enough and happiness long enough, but rather it's fleeting, and then we find ourselves back to square one. And if we do this long enough, say 10 years, 10, 15 years, in the job life and in the routines and the day-to-day, that those 10 to 15 years seem to fly by, and we're always chasing something, and we feel like we never have enough time to get it all done, and that we're always one step behind. That is the experience of chasing outcomes in hopes of those outcomes delivering our happiness. So I've noticed in my activities how more and more people, as early as their early 30s, are talking about this midlife crisis, this pre-midlife crisis. It's almost like a one-third life crisis, or even a quarter life crisis. And this is ultimately our inner voice is starting to rear its head, its voice. It's getting louder, saying the way you're living towards the external is not leading to the fulfillment that you're seeking. There's something that you're missing. And that ultimately is the internal, reflecting on who you are, what you want, not the outside voices we've been conditioned to follow, but really what is our personal blueprint? What is it wanting to say? What is it wanting us to do in this life? Our unique purpose. So on one hand, that's happening for all of us. This moment will come. If it hasn't already, it will come. And if it came and we didn't take action on it, we didn't seek to really let it sink in and let it inform us, then it will come again. It will not leave us alone. And that ultimately is a beautiful thing. Life wants us to grow. It wants us to be whole. It doesn't want us to stay small and limited and scared and feeling separate. It wants us to recognize the miracle that we all are. It wants us to experience the oneness of all of us, that we all come from the same place, return to the same place. And so it's constantly prodding us. Life is constantly prodding us, triggering us to look within. Those external circumstances, when they're not the way we want them to be, they trigger us somewhere inside. So engaging with the outside world ultimately is always pointing back to our inside world. And we can resist that for as long as we want. We can deny it for quite a while, but eventually it forces us to look within. If we don't nurture our inner life, at least as much as we're nurturing the outside life. And we start to suffer, we start to get depressed, we fall ill, all kinds of irritation, anxiety, fear take over. And that's ultimately because the external is really the lens through which we see the external is a reflection of who we are inside. It's a mirror. Life is always a mirror. We're always really just experiencing ourselves. And so the opportunity is to recognize that these triggers, that everything in the world that isn't the way we want it to be, that we feel annoyed by, is an opportunity to nurture ourselves on the inside. Because as we elevate our inner life, then the outer life follows. It mirrors that. So the more complete we feel on the inside, the more at peace we feel on the inside, the more purpose and confidence and trust we feel on the inside in our own inner truth, the more the outer world becomes one place of peace and a playground where we can follow our true purpose, not our attachments, but that which we are here to do. And all of that requires working through our inner life first. So that then raises the question, how do we confront the feelings that arise when this time of change comes? Because on one hand, it's great that that is coming, that it's saying enough is enough of this fixation on the external. Look to the internal and start nurturing that part of you. It's like a map. Your inner world is like a map, and you're only familiar with so many places. So you have to start exploring and discovering and traveling within. And again, you can do that by engaging with the external, but recognizing that it's always pointing back to something inside. As we engage with the external, it's showing us who we are in the inside. So recognizing that is one part. The other part now is that there might be fear. There might be the discomfort of growth, of change, ultimately, that comes when we recognize that we need to make changes in our life, that we're entering a new chapter. These fears and anxiety of the unknown, right? All of this is forcing us to come out of our comfort zones, but it's not easy. And that's where mindfulness and meditation start to come in, to really learn to engage and stay present with our experience of change, recognizing that thoughts come and go. We don't have to believe every single thought that comes along. Feelings arise and pass. We don't have to believe every feeling that comes along. And by not believing, I mean we don't have to identify with it. If we can be aware of our thoughts, that means we're not our thoughts. If we can be aware of our feelings, well, then clearly we're not our feelings. So if we're not our thoughts and we're not our feelings, who are we? Well, we're the awareness of those thoughts and feelings. The more time we spend on the side of awareness, the more we're grounded in our awareness of what's happening inside of us and outside of us, the more we become the container of life as opposed to the roller coaster of life. If we get lost in every thought that comes along, we've all experienced this. We go down rabbit holes, one after another, spend half our day easily lost in thought. All that time, we're not really here. We're not really present. We're not really alive. And if we react to every feeling that comes along, pleasant feelings, ooh, I like that. Unpleasant feelings, oh, I don't like that. We're in constant reactivity to the feelings, and we look to the outside world again to try and either blame or in some way regulate how we feel. And that too is a small existence. We get pulled into the identification with our thoughts and our feelings. So if we can learn to nurture our awareness muscle, then we become bigger than our thoughts and feelings. And then we can hold space for pretty much anything in life to come. Just like going to the gym, we start out with small weights. We most likely aren't able to hold space for any situation that comes along. But that's why we practice. That's why we have a mindfulness practice daily to reinforce. And not just in our sits. Very often we don't have time for sitting in the morning or the evening, but using every opportunity during the day to engage with the reality of the present moment is just about as good as sitting and meditating. It's it's meditation is a state of being that we bring to every situation. It helps to get a jump start by meditating in the morning, helps to set the tone. But ultimately, don't just leave that behind and then go into the rest of your day, but rather look at each opportunity. Is it triggering me? Where is it triggering me? Let the feeling, the sensation of where it is in your body pull you in and hold space for that. It wouldn't happen if you're just sitting in your on the sofa meditating. That's not really where we get triggered. So it's not how we really grow. We can't point to the things that we need to release. But everyday situations constantly point to the things we need to release. It's a festival of being triggered out there. And so taking that mindset of embracing that, okay, I'm going out there to engage with life and learn more about me, discover that map inside. And that only comes through, especially through engaging with other people, but everyday situations. When you're waiting in line at the coffee shop, rather than reaching for our devices again, take a moment to observe things you haven't observed before. Our senses is what keep us glued to the present moment. So seeing things, observing them, not just the mental snapshot of what it is, the memory of what something is, but the actual aliveness of what it is in front of us. Um, Hearing things, tasting things, all of our senses are constantly engaging with the world around us. And if we stay attuned to our senses, if we stay aware of our senses, that's when we stay present. Our awareness can only be there, be activated in what's happening right now. So if you're aware, it means you're present. If we get lost in thought, past or future, then we lose our presence. So I forgot to mention in the beginning, at any time during my talks, feel free to type some questions or comments into the chat, or those who have been here before, you can raise your virtual hand. It's down there somewhere. And because every life situation is different, I can talk in from many perspectives, but ultimately we all have our own unique combination of circumstances that we find challenging. So always feel free to ping me. Let me make sure that yeah. Um, I still can't figure out what makes me happy. It is still about the other person. And this is a very common thing. I had that too. Come from a family of deep altruists. We're always about giving, never about receiving. So the focus was always on making others happy and defining ourselves and our own happiness through making other people happy. And it's a deep, it can be a deep-seated one, but that's why we come together to practice our awareness muscle so that we become more and more aware of our sensations, our feelings, our thoughts. Um, the only way to break the patterns, the best way, if not the only way to break these behavioral patterns, is to notice how we feel. When we can notice how we feel by observing sensations, then we break the reactive loop of our constantly repeating the same behavioral patterns. Because constantly repeating the same behavioral patterns, you have to look real closely to understand this. It's essentially a reaction to how we feel. So, and how we feel shows up in our body as a sensation. So if you can start to nurture your awareness of your sensations in your body, then you come out of the blind reactivity to the sensations that were evoked by some person, place, or thing around us. But rather than blaming the person, place, or thing, rather than trying to change them or control them, you now have the ability, because you can't change other people, you now have the ability to change the way you react to how you feel, and ultimately not change it, but come out of reaction altogether, so that you can observe just the sensation, keep a clear-headed mind, and then take action to bring change to the external situation, which could be having a conversation, distancing yourself, and in many cases, just noticing how other people make you feel, and then drawing your own conclusions from that. So, uh, great question. And there are many, many different challenges that we face. Most challenges, I would say, are inherited, that we've been conditioned with their family structures and patterns, social conditioning, and it's not, most of the time, it's not even our own stuff. But we've been, for one reason or another, we've been ordained the black sheep of our family to be the one who breaks the patterns, who no longer blindly repeats them. And that in itself is an honor. It means something about you, your soul is ready to no longer just do what everyone else is doing for the sake of doing it a particular way. So uh it's hard to heal not just yourself, you're essentially healing your lineage. But if you feel called to do it, then that's a great calling to have, I should say. Yeah. All right. So, with that said, if everyone is ready, we can um, practice our two-part meditation today. I'll guide you through a thought awareness meditation working with our breath, and then followed by a body scan, a body awareness meditation. And for those of you who are new, or just to reinforce the purpose of this, we're essentially practicing keeping our mind focused on one particular spot in the thought awareness, the breath awareness exercise. And when we notice that the mind has drifted, which it always does, the key is to accept that the mind has drifted and bring your attention back to your breath. If we notice our mind has drifted and we get frustrated and flustered about it, then we're in resistance to something that we want to be different. But it already is, it's already happened, it's real. And resistance to that is futile. It's not, our resistance is not going to change it. So this is essentially our everyday situation in everyday life, is that we notice a situation is not the way we want it to be. And the path of least resistance is to make changes. However, we don't do that. We react and want the situation to be different and blame others for being who they are, and all kinds of victim mindset and finger pointing sets in, and frustration and depression that why is life not going the way I want it to? All of this extra stuff is what we put on top of the situation. That is our reactivity to the situation. So to come out of that reactivity, this is why we're practicing noticing the sensations as they show up in our body. So that when we're in everyday life, then something triggers us, instead of reacting to the feeling ultimately and blaming the outside world, we notice where we feel triggered, and that breaks the reactive loop. And then we can take clear action to make change. We should. Meditation is always about maintaining equanimity, a clear head, a level head, so that we don't get pulled into reactivity. Decisions we make from reactivity are never good decisions, but decisions we make from a clear head, clear mind, those are good decisions, right decisions. They take more perspectives, as many as we can hold perspectives into account. Reactive decisions are just based from the single perspective of feeling triggered. So that's never the whole picture. Um, so, so we're ultimately practicing the situations that we encounter all day long. It's usually all the little situations that annoy us. So that when we notice something isn't going the way we want it to, we notice how that makes us feel. That's what breaks the cycle of reactivity. And then we take clear action and bring the situation back to what we want it to be. And so that's what we're practicing with this breath exercise, noticing that the mind has drifted and accepting that the mind has drifted so that with calmness and clarity, we bring our attention back to where we want it to be, which is our breath. So that calmness is our awareness muscle, is noticing that something isn't the way we wanted and without reacting to it, but rather taking clear action to it. That's how we nurture our awareness muscle. It's how we become bigger in our awareness. That's how we become a container for every situation. And then no situation can really get to us any longer because we're the wrapper, we're the envelope, we're bigger than any situation because we're aware of it. Our awareness is our deeper self, our higher self. It's our true essence. And it's so much greater and bigger and more powerful than any situation can be. All right. Well, with that said, finding a comfortable position and with our eyes and mouth closed, let's focus on the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of our nostrils. If you have trouble locating your breath, you may breathe slightly harder once or twice. And then return to natural breath, normal breath. Let the detail of your breath pull you in closer. If it's more in the left nostril, let it be the left nostril. If it's more in the right nostril, let it be the right nostril. And if it's in both nostrils, let it be both nostrils. Notice the temperature of the incoming breath. Notice the temperature of the outgoing breath. Notice if there's a difference. Notice the pace of the incoming breath. Notice the pace of the outgoing breath. Notice if there's a difference. And whenever you find that your mind has wandered, simply notice it. And without frustration, bring your attention back to the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of your nostrils. Gradually bring your attention to the top of your head, your crown chakra, an area about the size of your fist, and notice any sensations that may arise. It could be a tingling sensation, a tickly sensation, a prickly sensation, or pulsating sensation. It could be a feeling of lightness or of pressure, of hot or cold. Any sensation is a valid sensation. No need to look for any particular sensation. Simply observe without wanting it to be different. And if you feel no sensation at all, that's all right too. Now gradually move your attention to your forehead, move around to the left side of your head, come around to the back of your skull, around to the right side of your head, always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now move your attention into your right eye socket, over to the bridge of your nose, and on to the left eye socket, down to your left cheek, over to your lips, and on to the right cheek, and moving down to your chin. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Moving down to the front of your throat, down to the left side of your neck, the back of your neck, the right side of your neck, moving down into your right shoulder, down into the bicep, down to the tricep, and down into the back of your elbow, Down to the inside of your elbow. Down to the inside of your forearm. Down to the outside of your forearm. To the back of your hand. Around to the palm of your hand. And into your fingers. All the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left shoulder. Down into your bicep. And around to the tricep. Down into the outside of your elbow. And around to the inside of your elbow. Down into the inside of your forearm. The outside of your forearm. And into the back of your hand. Down to the palm of your hand. And into your fingers. All the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left upper back and slowly, evenly scan left to right. Bring down to your right middle back. Slowly, evenly scan right to left. Bring down to your left lower back. Slowly, evenly scan left to right. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left upper chest. Slowly, evenly scan left to right. Down to your right rib cage. Slowly, evenly scan right to left. Bring down to your lower left stomach. Slowly, evenly scan left to right. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Move your attention down to your root chakra, the area above your pubic bone. Gradually move your attention over to your left hip. Onto the left butt cheek. And the right butt cheek. And the right hip. And moving down to your right upper thigh. First the front. Then the back. Moving down to the back of your knee. Come around to the front of your knee. Moving down into your right shin. And around to the calf. Now slowly, evenly, starting with the heel, gradually scan across the bottom of your foot. Come around to the top of your foot. Now into your toes, all the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left upper thigh, first the front, and around to the back, down into the back of your knee, down to the front of your knee, down into your shin, down to the calf, now starting with the heel, slowly and evenly scan across the bottom of your foot. Come around to the top of your foot. And into your toes, all the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Once you feel ready, you may open your eyes. Relax your body. Notice your environment. Notice yourself and your environment. Notice the energy in your body. Notice your aliveness. Thank you all for joining. Maintain your presence for the rest of the day and throughout the week. Thank you all. See you next time.